And I would like to begin with verse 4. With verse 4. Where no oxen are, the crib is clean, but much increases by the strength of the ox. Now, you know, at the first read, this may not seem terribly profound. It may not even be terribly clear, but let's read it again. Where no oxen are, the crib is clean, but much increases by the strength of the ox. Here's what I think this is saying. If you want a clean crib, don't have an ox. Just don't have an ox. That's not rocket science. Don't have an ox. But much increases by the strength of the ox. So hello, class. If you want the increase of the ox, you're going to have to clean the crib. You're just going to have to clean the crib. And my paraphrase for that is, you can't have the benefit without the cost. You can't have the benefit without the cost. I can tell you that there are some folks who start out in life wanting it all before they've paid any price. They want to start out with everything. You may know people like that. I'm not sure that one of the reasons that they may think that is because somehow when they've been raised, they have been taught, either directly or indirectly, that there doesn't have to be a cost associated with some kind of a benefit. In other words, sometimes I think that parents, I'm reasonably sure grandparents, sometimes will cover the cost and give the benefit. And what that does is it teaches, or it seems to me it does, it teaches the notion that you can have it all without paying the cost. Let me just reinforce something that everybody here over the age of 30 knows for sure, and the others either know it as well. I'm not saying that if you're under 30 you don't know this, but I promise you will know it at one point, and that is, if you want the job, that really wonderful job, you may have to get the education. You may have to do that. There may be a cost associated with that benefit. If you want something that has real benefit, if you want the increase of the ox, get out the pitchfork. Just get out the pitchfork and be prepared to clean the crib. You're just going to have to clean the crib. There is a cost associated with benefits, and it seems to me like we do a disservice to some when we help perpetuate the notion that you can have it all and there's no real cost to it. No, there is. There is a cost associated with that. I will tell you that I spend a lot of my time with people under the age of 30, over the age of 20, under the age of 30. And I can tell you none of them, as far as I know, came from Sequatchie County. As far as I know, none of them had the benefit of spending time in Sequatchie County. So I don't want to generalize to the point that I'm including people that may have been raised better. But there is this sense that I have a right to it. I have a right to the increase of the ox, and somebody else needs to pay the benefit. Somebody else needs to pay the cost. Somebody else needs to do that. I can tell you that one of the problems, it seems to me, in our society is that there is this notion that has been perpetuated, and much of it in our lifetime, that you can have it all. You can have it all without the cost that goes with it. Listen to me, please. If you want the increase of the ox, you got to clean the crib. You just got to clean the crib. And hello, you got to feed the ox. You got to feed them too. So I can tell you, let's read the verse again. I'm reasonably sure that's what it says. No oxen are, the crib is clean, but much increases by the strength of the ox. If you want the stuff, you got to be prepared to work for it. You really do. Okay, that's verse 4. Verse 12. Now, you notice that I have these verses, and they're not really in a sequence, and I have them out of sequence for a particular reason, and I hope that's all right. But in verse 12, there is a way which seemeth right unto man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. Now, a couple of weeks back, and I talked about there are occasions when it's best to listen to someone else who knows more than you do, and I'm going to tell you something. You know, I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night, and I know enough to listen to people that know more than I do. So I had a conversation with Dave Davenport about this particular subject I'm about to tell you, because I'm really not much in this particular area, certainly compared to my brother. When I was in ground school to learn to fly, they showed us a video. And I described this to David, and he's either seen something like that or he, of course, affirmed that this is exactly what happens. It's been a few years, and so I just needed to be sure. They had a pilot, a commercial pilot, as I recall, is one of the big airlines, and they put him on a stool that would rotate. They put a blindfold on this pilot, and they set him on this stool, and somehow they began to turn that stool to the left. And they said to him, "What's happening?" And he said, "I'm turning to the left." Sure enough, he was. They sped it up just slightly, and he said, it's increasing in speed. We could see as it began to slow down, and he said, it's increasing in speed. It came to a stop, and he said, it's turning to the left. They began to turn it to the right. He said, it's turning to the left. They picked up speed to the right. He said it came to a stop. Well, I would tell you something. I learned something by watching that, which was the objective. And that is, you can't trust your feelings. When you lose sight, you can't trust your feelings. You cannot trust your feelings. When further in my conversation with David, he pointed out that there's one pilot in particular that flew into the water because he apparently everybody supposes that John Kennedy Jr. flew his plane into the water thinking he was flying straight and level. The one thing I'm sure of is this, that when you lose sight of the horizon, if you don't trust the instruments, you're going to die. You will die. There is no human being that can trust their feeling if you can't see. You have to trust your instruments. You got to trust your instruments or you're going to die. It worries me, frankly, that sometimes people put so much emphasis on feeling. Listen to me, beloved, you can't trust your feelings. You can't trust your feelings. You can trust this and this alone. The fact of the matter is that I had this conversation, I think, one of the earlier sessions. But the things that worry me the most on TV or movies or whatever, the things that worry me most, and of course, I'm disappointed, as I know you are, with many of the things that transpire. But the things that worry me the most are those that subtly cause me wanting the wrong thing to happen. I mean, it just feels like he should be with her. I mean, really. I mean, she's the other one doesn't treat him all that well. I mean, she's not very affectionate, and her person is not whatever. And so it just feels like that should be right. Don't trust your feelings. I worry when people trust their feelings. You're going to die. Here's the thing. I can tell you that people can find all sorts of ways to justify their feelings, to create within them a notion that whatever they're doing is right. I reaffirmed today, I checked, and one of the last things that John Wilkes Booth said was, "Tell my mother I died for my country." You want to know something? He felt like at some point what he did was right. 10 days ago, that man in Orlando, I mean, he felt like what he was doing was justified somehow under the circumstances. Those may be outrageous examples, but I can tell you that we sometimes find ways to feel like that it's appropriate to do whatever it is we choose to do. But let me just tell you something: if it's not confirmed by something outside our feelings, we cannot trust it. You can't trust it if it doesn't match this. I'm going to tell you, sometimes we get to the place where we're just so persuaded that this action or that action is appropriate when it is absolutely inappropriate because it says so in the book. Now, here's the kicker. There's a kicker. Instruments in the plane sometimes mess up. They do. They're not Absolutely, absolutely perfect. Once in a while, you read about a plane that went down because the instruments were bad. Once in a while that happens. But let me just tell you something. If you're in a plane and you can't see, you better trust those, because I promise you, if you don't, you will die. You will die. The good news is this one isn't. This is infallible. Are you with me? Are you with me, friends? This one is. There might be something else that under some circumstances fails. That one doesn't. I got it on good authority. That one doesn't fail. The verse says there's a way that seems right. It just seems right. It seems like that ought to be the answer. It seems like this time it's different. This time it's different. I can tell you that when you take the check ride, they put a hood over your eyes, and the instructor sitting beside you takes the plane, and he does all sorts of things, or she does all sorts of things with the plane, and then without seeing anything outside, you have to recover. Got to recover. And I will tell you something, when you do, it feels wrong. I mean, it feels like that's not what it should be. Excuse me. It feels like it's just awkward. You trust the instruments, and you fly straight. And sometimes they're wrong. Not much, but sometimes. This one is never wrong. I just need you to know this, please. If there's ever a time when you feel like something is appropriate, when it just feels like it ought to be this way, and this is contrary to this book, don't trust your feelings. You cannot trust your feelings. It's one of the things that concerns me so much, preacher, about religious types who put so much emphasis on feelings. It is so totally inappropriate to trust your feelings. There is a way that seemeth right unto man, and the end thereof are the ways of death. Are we together? Pretty sure about that. All right, here we go. Go from the presence, verse 7, go from the presence of a foolish man when thou perceivest not in him the lips of knowledge. Now, a couple weeks ago when I was here, I was in chapter 13, and the verse that I talked about in verse 13, one of the verses in 13 was this chapter 13, verse 20. Walk with the wise and become wise, for the companion of fools suffers harm. And the verse here is, go from the presence of a foolish man when thou perceivest not in him the lips of knowledge. Well, my paraphrase for that is, we should not, do not, hang out. I've got quotes around, hang out with people who are obviously ungodly. Now, I think what this is saying is the following. It says, go from the presence of a foolish man when thou perceivest not in him the lips of knowledge. That we have associations. We do. We have associations, and this goes back to one of the early sessions that we had when there was an opportunity to discuss those with whom we associate. Well, of course, there are different kinds or different bases, or there's different motivations for our associations. But clearly, the verse from chapter 13 and this one as well is suggesting that we ought to choose those with whom we associate carefully, and we ought to be very, very careful that we don't choose to associate with ungodly people. When it's obvious, when thou perceivest not in him the lips of knowledge. So when he gives it away, or she gives it away, when it's obvious as it can be that these are ungodly people, these are not people we should be hanging out with in terms of fellowship. They're just not. We should not get our satisfaction. We should not get our fellowship. We should not get our opportunities to relax and to be ourselves and to associate otherwise with ungodly people. I'm sorry, we shouldn't. Of course, we all recognize. Nobody's going to question the fact that we can be. We're not supposed to be a monastery, in my view. We're supposed to be the salt, and we're supposed to be the light. And we are supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. I get that. I get it. We are supposed to be a testimony, and we're supposed to be examples to others. But listen, you can test your own, your own motives. And the next time that you're with a group of people who are hanging out, whatever it is they're doing, you should just ask yourself, why am I here? Why am I here? If I'm here because I want to be a good testimony, I want to set an example, and I want people to see my life and to see the way I live and to see the way I respond and to see how I react under certain circumstances in hopes that when the opportunity presents itself and I give a testimony that I'll have some credibility. In other words, what I say will make some sense. If that's your motive, bless your heart. You need to stay. You need to stay. But if your motive, if the reason that you're there is because I feel comfortable with these people, I feel comfortable with them. Can I tell you that everybody who is not a believer is not difficult to be around? They're just not. I teach with some people who are just they're nice people. I mean, there's some people who are socially adept to the extent I wish I was. I wish I were much more like that. I mean, they respond appropriately under most circumstances. But please listen to me. I need to find my opportunities for fellowship with people who believe like I do, have a worldview like I do. That's exactly where I need to get my fellowship. We think sometimes that children become like the kids with whom they hang, and they do. They tend to, for sure. But you know what? I'm not sure they're the only ones that do. I'm just not sure that it's only kids who somehow morph or change into adjust into the folks with whom they most closely associated. I'm not sure that we can say it as only they, that once we reach the age of whatever age we are, that we're no longer susceptible to being to peer pressure or to being more like the people with whom we associate. I can tell you that when you're with people who laugh at things that believers should not find particularly funny, or who have priorities different than a believer should have, at some point it rubs off. It just does. The verse, "Go from the presence of a foolish man when thou perceivest not in him the lips of knowledge." I'm totally persuaded we should not hang out with people who are obviously, when it becomes apparent, this is not where I should be getting my fellowship. This is not where I should be hanging. When it becomes obvious to that point, bless your heart, you either need to leave, pick other friends, or you need to find a way to adjust the purpose for you being there so that you can be the testimony that we clearly are supposed to be. I mean, we're supposed to be, and we ought to be. All right. Now, when I generally finish, and I suppose tonight will not be any different unless I treat it differently before I finish, the preacher says, does anybody have any comments or whatever? And I think I've generally made them welcome, except when I didn't. So if somebody has a thought, I'm happy to trot that little sucker out here, and we'll see if people salute or otherwise. If you have a different view on anything that I've said so far, or you have a comment. Okay, we're good. Say it again.
On the paraphrase on number 7.
Okay.
I would paraphrase it. Do not be influenced by people who are obviously ungodly.
Do not be influenced by people who are obviously ungodly. That's Mike's paraphrase, and it's a good one. And I will tell you this: I'm totally good with that. I will tell you this, Mike. I believe this to be so, that if people hang out with them, at some point you're going to be influenced by them. I mean, it's hard not to be. Again, maybe we're invulnerable. I don't think we are. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not. I have to tell you, I can be influenced by the people with whom I hang out, but I'm good with that. Clearly, we shouldn't be influenced by those. I'm good with that paraphrase. I'm okay. I accept your amendment. The chair accepts the amendment. Any other votes? No. Any other thoughts, comments? Okay, let's go to verse 13. Even in laughter, the heart is sorrowful, and the end of that mirth is heaviness. Now, my paraphrase is distractions, which is what I think in this concept laughter is talking about. Distractions do not change the circumstances. They just don't change the circumstances. Even if a person can be, I'm not saying distractions are always bad. I'm not saying that at all. I think that sometimes it may be It may be healthy to find a way to be distracted or to distract somebody from some particular difficult thing. But I'm going to tell you, ultimately, they don't change the circumstances. I mean, if something is sad or sorrowful, even some kind of a distraction does not take away the sadness or the sorrow from that. And when I sometimes run these by one of my spiritual authorities, it's also known as Tricia, and she said that there was a person who popped into her mind immediately when she read this verse. Anybody think of someone? Robin Williams. Robin Williams. Some of you not familiar with the name? He's a comedian. I think pretty good. You know, I have much experience with him. Frankly, I think there's some reasons why I didn't particularly think some of his humor was funny, but he was generally accepted or recognized to be a pretty funny guy, and he whatever. But he was miserable, and of course, he had a bad end. So the verse is, even in laughter, the heart is sorrowful, and the end of that mirth is heaviness, and distractions, whatever how they are. And again, I'm not saying that those distractions would necessarily be bad, nefarious, wrong, but they clearly don't change the circumstances. They don't, and so if there's something much more than this, much more than just telling a joke or getting somebody to laugh, tickling them about something. If there's some kind of an issue that's causing it, the root probably needs to be addressed as well. All right. Here we go. The simple, verse 15. The simple believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going. Now, I have my paraphrase for that is gullible people are inevitably in trouble. I don't know why. The simple, is generally speaking, it's someone who doesn't know better. We had one of that was one of the definitions we had actually the very first night. Someone who doesn't know better. It believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going. I have I have my paraphrase, but after that, if it's too good to be true, it usually is. It always surprises me, and truly it surprises me at how gullible people can tend to be for whatever reason. They just don't look well to their going. Prudent man looketh well to his going. I would have to say that most of us would be shocked, were shocked, when we realized how many people and who they were who were totally fooled by Bernie Madoff, that guy with the Ponzi scheme. I'm sorry. I mean, to imagine, there's some pretty smart people. They were pretty smart people that got totally fooled with that. When I came to this point, I went back and a couple days ago, and I printed out an email that had been sent to me. And I get these emails, I suppose, you may as well, incidentally, I don't know. I get these emails every couple days. In fact, I printed out two. And one of them is a little obscure. It's a little hard to pick up. But this is just a totally wonderful thing. It says, "Dear respectable one." Immediately when I read that, I knew this guy knows me. I mean, he knows me. I mean, this, you talk about a personal email. I'm sorry, this guy, Ed, this guy's got to know Lee Coppock. He says, "Dear respectable one, my name is Dan," something I can't pronounce last. "I work with the Citizens Bank in Nigeria, branch manager, bill exchange, whatever, foreign exchange, whatever. I need to get you back to me concerning your late cousin's fund worth $20 million. All you need to do is stand as next of kin to our late customer so that the fund can be transferred to you. I'm assuring you 100% risk-free transaction." Now, when I started this out, Tommy, the preacher wants to know when that tithe check is coming in. That's what he just wants to know when the tithe's coming in. He everything else went over his head once he got the figure. But, the kicker is people respond to these. They do. They do. And we say, how could anybody be quite that foolish? Except they are. And the thing that really surprises me is people are vulnerable, not necessarily, I hope, to something like this. Incidentally, I'm going over there next week to see if I can get that money. I just want to see if I can get that money.
Do they happen to tell you how much risk-free your money is going to cost?
I was supposed to respond with some information, which I didn't read the whole thing. It got a little more in there, but I was supposed to respond, and for whatever reason, I haven't yet. But the fact of the matter is, people still think, listen to me please, people still think that they can get rich quick sometimes. There's I can't think what it's called. It might be the lottery or something. I don't know. There's something like that. People still think, people who are otherwise fairly intelligent, who still think that there are schemes. I can get there quickly. I can do it. There are shortcuts. We go back maybe one of the earlier verses, the ox and the crib being clean. But they just think that there's a shortcut somehow to that rainbow. That there is. The simple believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going. Let me just say this. First of all, there are things that come up sometimes that might be good. I mean, I'm sorry, they might just be a totally wonderful opportunity, or there might be something. I'm not saying that things don't happen, and they do. And it may be that that some product really is worth investing in the purchase of a product. I'm not talking about any necessarily large or whatever, but it happens. There is an area of law now that specializes in. It's called elder law, and 80% of elder law. We have a whole center where I teach on elder law. Most of it, at least 80%, most of it is because people are defrauded. And people who you would think would know better. Well, here's my suggestion. Regardless of whether you would be qualified to be represented in the area of elder law or not, I recommend, if there's something that seems like it's a wonderful thing, I would look well to your going. I just would. I just be careful. You may even want to get some counsel on that. This could be one of those good things where you say, you know what, I really need somebody else to take a look at this because it seems too good to be true, which means it probably is. The simple believe every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going. Are we good? Yes. I got a couple. Let me take over here first, and I'll come there, Phil. Yes. It is so troublesome to me, and you know what? It's possible that there's nobody here who's ever had anything like been the recipient of a bad. That's true. It's possible that nobody here has ever been vulnerable to this kind of a thing. It's possible that it is, and I hope not, and I hope nobody that's you or nobody as close to you ever is. But I will tell you that there is this notion that there are things like this, and I'm totally with you on this, Pete. I think that that's particularly heinous. That's particularly ugly in my view when somebody tries to associate some spiritual outcome with a prayer cloth that somebody wiped their sweat on or something. I'm sorry, the preacher may have some of those, but we don't want them, and we're not selling them tonight. Phil, you had your hand up. Okay. I totally agree. I mean, these are not verses. They appear to be, and frankly, sometimes it's hard for me to connect them together, but they do connect. They are connected in many ways. One of these verses to another one, and so you're right. It feels like it ought to be good. I'm sorry. I understand, since I'm the respected one, he must be talking to me. I've got to be. I mean, it's got to be right. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? All right. Okay, we're good. Verse 23. In all labor there's profit, but the talk of the lips tendeth only to penury. Well, I think penury means poor. I mean, that's what I think it means. Now, we've had this, and I've already had somebody tell me tonight I'm not supposed to talk about words because they got in trouble with the last time I spoke about words. I think that was in jest. I presume it was. But we had a conversation before when there were words, and it's appropriate to make a living with words. It's also appropriate to make a living with your hands or some other way. But this verse here is what this is saying, or what I think it's saying is, in all labor there's profit, but the talk of the lips tendeth only to penury, to poor, to having nothing. My paraphrase: talking alone doesn't get it done. It just doesn't get it done. We know that there are people who are great talkers. Maybe they're selling a holy water or something. They're selling something or whatever, but talking alone doesn't get it done. If there's not some purpose behind the conversation or behind the whatever's being said, if there's not some objective, if it's not going somewhere, if there's not some outcome, then talking alone does not get it done. It just doesn't get it done. And so, we know. I mean, we do know. We know big talkers, people who talk a great line, and no matter the subject, they're authorities. And they can wax eloquent, or whatever that means, talk a lot about something, regardless of what it is. But talking alone is not going to get it done. It's just not going to get it done. So there's chapter 15. Those of you who have an opportunity to take a look at that in advance will know there's a lot in there on words and a lot on talking. It's one of the major themes. One of the things that I didn't mention before, and relative to talking, is it may be fine. Words are fine, and they can be totally wonderful, just like they can be totally devastating. But talking alone doesn't get it done. It's not enough. It's just not enough. All right. Any talkers? Excuse me. Anybody want to come? There we go, Pete. We got it. That's okay. You're in, my brother. There you have it. Well, yes, BW.
Well, you was talking about Malin, and he's talking about Jim Baker. It reminded me of something that you probably won't ever use no more. But it said today's harvest of some of these preachers is like pet industry. It says it gives you a warm feeling that you don't like them.
Listen, let me just tell you this. Let me tell you that it felt right to ask for comments. But I'm reasonably sure. Yeah, there you go. I'm with you, Pete. What the mistake obviously was calling on just everybody who raised their hand, and that was the mistake that I made. Well, the truth is that we've had a song tonight, and we've had some whatever that was that our brother shared with us that. Preacher, we may need to have an exorcism in this church before you have the business meeting. I don't know. It's just maybe that what we need to do. All right. Ed? Is that what that is?
Welcome to Sequatchie County.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Okay. Redneck philosophy, welcome to Sequatchie County. Okay. Well, I suppose I should feel welcome, but I do. As a matter of fact, I do. I feel a little warm here. All right. we're gonna do our best to go on. I think that I'm trying to decide why I thought it was a good idea. Oh, here we go. Verse 29. He that is slow to wrath is of great understanding, but he that is of a hasty spirit exalteth folly. It shouldn't be difficult to figure out what this verse is saying. I have the first underline is quick-tempered. There's a hyphen there. Quick-tempered people are. And you know what? If you see my notes, I don't have any word filled in there. I just have another line. And what I think that you should fill in there is the word, the most outrageous term that your mother would allow you to use. Quick-tempered people are stupid. Quick-tempered people are dumb. Quick-tempered people are losers. I'm sorry? They are dangerous. Whatever word, but here's clearly what this verse is saying is it's a mistake to be quick-tempered. That's what it's saying. It's a mistake. That's a mistake. And people, I find they find opportunities to excuse what's otherwise inexcusable. That's just the way I am. That's the way God made me, preacher. He gave me this, this tendency to fly off the handle. So it must be all right. That's just the way I am. That's just the way I am. In other words, it's take it or leave it. That's just the way I am. Well, bless your heart if you have that with respect to that particular characteristic or some other one. It's a mistake to be quick-tempered. It just is. And it is. I like Phil's dangerous. It is dangerous. Anybody with a comment? I'm not going to ask them for no confessions. And I think, BW, we're pretty much covered tonight. So thank you very much. Ed, yes. No question about it. They lose respect. They lose control. They lose respect. And there are other verses in Proverbs related to this, and they're vulnerable. They really are when this happens, but they totally lose respect in public, and they probably lose respect in private. They lose respect whenever it happens. They've lost respect. Anybody else on quick-tempered? Okay. Now, you see, I've separated verses 21 and 31 out just a little bit. This subject is related. And a few weeks back, I warned you, I gave you what's called notice. I gave you notice that I was going to get into an area where I sometimes, it's a soapbox for me. Now, in particular, at the time, that verse was related to giving, to being generous. And, of course, the preacher preached a couple Sunday nights ago on giving. His reference, of course, was in the context he was using was with tithing. But this is really the heart of a subject that's just near and dear to my heart. And frankly, it's possible for me to go too far with this. I will tell you that it is, and I'm really sensitive to that, and so I'm doing my best not to. But I want you to look, please, with me at verse 21. He that despiseth, and another way to describe that word is holds as insignificant. He that despiseth his neighbor sinneth, but he that hath mercy on the poor, happy is he. Another translation, it's a sin to despise one's neighbor, but blessed is the one who is kind to the needy. Now, I know people can be needy for a variety of reasons. I know that. People can be needy of spirit. They can be needy, they can be needy for a variety of reasons. But this context of this, it seems to me, clearly is talking about people that are needy financially. These are people that are poor. And when we're talking poor, I'm talking poor in the sense that most typically comes to our minds. These people are poor. My paraphrase to this is, if you want to be happy today, then do something kind for the poor. I think that's what it says. If you want to be happy today, do something kind for the poor. I'll give you the King James Version again. He that despiseth his neighbor sinneth, but he that hath mercy on the poor, happy is he. Okay. You want to be happy today? Do something kind to the poor. Now, I'm going to put the next verse in there, and you'll notice that my paraphrase looks similar. That was by design. The paraphrase, let's look at 31. He that oppresseth the poor reproacheth his maker, but he that honoreth him hath mercy on the poor. Now, We have had this conversation before about words that are, these are called, or I'm reasonably sure they're called pronouns. In other words, when a word is in there that takes place of a noun, sometimes it's a little awkward to tell who the he is referring to or who the they is referring to. So let's be sure we're clear. And I'm going to read this with the substitution that I think is appropriate for these pronouns, these his, that word. If you see it differently, trot your hand right up and we'll talk about it. But I think I've thought this through and I generally have it right. Verse 31, a person that oppresses the poor reproaches the person's maker. Excuse me, I'll strike that. Reproaches the poor's maker. That's what it is. A person who oppresses the poor reproaches the poor's maker. But that person who honors the poor, but he that honoreth him hath mercy on the poor. He that honoreth the poor has mercy on the poor. Let me look at this next verse. Let me look at the NIV for this. Whoever, I like the whoever better, oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker, but whosoever is kind to the needy honors God. There it is. I'm sorry. That's the better one. That's the better one. So here's what I think that verse says. I'm good with the NIV translation of that. When somebody oppresses the poor, has contempt for the poor, looks down on the poor, they show contempt for God, for the poor's maker. They do. They show contempt. God made them. Whoever is kind to the needy honors God. So my paraphrase for this verse, you want to honor God today? Do something kind for the poor. Do something kind for the poor. That's really what it says. Now, let me just tell you that there's a couple things about these verses that almost always engender discussion, or somebody almost always raises this point. Sometimes people are poor for different reasons. The fact is, there may not even be some overall overreaching reason that people are poor. They're poor. If you go back, please, to verse 21. The latter part, he that hath mercy on the poor, happy is he. There's no discussion there about this person is poor because they couldn't help it. There's no discussion there that when we're to show mercy on the poor, when we're supposed to not despise the poor and despise the poor's maker, which is God, when we're supposed to, there's no discussion there that this person has to be poor through no fault of their own. There just isn't there. There's no qualifier for that. There just isn't. I recognize that sometimes people are poor because of bad choices. Hello, class. A lot of times they're poor because of bad choices. There's no discussion here that says, there's nothing in either one of these verses which says that the only time we're supposed to be sensitive to the needs of the poor is if they got poor for good reasons. That's not there. It's just not there. The fact of the matter is, I'm persuaded that we're happier and that he's happier with us if we're kind to the poor. I'm persuaded of that. I think that's what these verses say. And you know, as I know, these are not the only verses that say that have that totally wonderful, profound truth. We need to be kind to the poor. We really need to be generous to the poor. I frequently share examples that don't put me in a particularly good light. And, I don't have any trouble coming up with those examples. In fact, it's most everyone that comes to mind. It's just, that happened to me, and I didn't look very good. But, this one is a little different, and please forgive me, because I really have tried to be careful with this. But so here I was with a group of seniors from Christian high school, and my son was in the group, and we were in Washington, D.C. I'll do this quickly because I'm about out of time. And we had a budget, and I'm going to tell you something about budget. We had a serious budget, and over which, each of the kids were given an amount to have food for the day, and that's all there was. I mean, there just wasn't any more. Some of them brought money from home. I'm sure some of them couldn't bring more money from home, and frankly, it was not a particularly a good time financially as far as we were concerned. But anyway, so we went to breakfast at this wonderful restaurant called McDonald's, and when I walked in there with these seniors, there was a guy sitting at the table who clearly was not, he was poor. It was obvious as anything it could be. He was poor. And he said to me, "Would you buy me a cup of coffee?" And, I have a reaction It's not the same as it was then, but I had a reaction. And, typically speaking, I said no. No, as a matter of fact, I won't. It wasn't so much because I didn't want to spend the money, even though I really didn't have a lot of it. It was just because, I suppose that he would, do something else at some point with which I would not approve. As a matter of fact, he had some things in front of him on the table with which I didn't think was a good way to spend money. In any event, I said no. Well, we got back to the room, and of course, I was convicted. I was convicted like you read about. I was so ashamed. I was so ashamed of what I'd done. So I sent my son and another person with him go, run over there and buy that guy some coffee, because I was convicted to where it hurt my soul. They came back in a few minutes and said, "Poppy, he's gone." They said, "He's gone. He's not there." My entire day was ruined, just ruined. Next morning, we were going to branch out, and there was a Burger King down the street, and so I said, "If you want to go there, that's fine, but I'm going back to McDonald's." And there he was. And I said, "You know what? I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. Can I buy you breakfast? Can I get you an Egg McMuffin or something?" And you know what he said? "Can you afford two? Can you afford two?" Actually, I can. I can afford two. And then, that was my money. And so one of the students said, "Mr. Coppock, let me help you buy some breakfast." And I said, "Actually, no, I'm not going to have any today. I need to do penance. I need to feel a little pain because of my callousness." I can tell you something. I don't believe that every time somebody asks for something in that circumstance, I still don't believe that it's appropriate to do whatever it is that they ask. But let me just tell you something. Those that have pity on the poor feel better about it. They themselves are happier. That's what the verse says. And that we honor that person's maker when we're generous to the poor. These verses come up additionally in Proverbs. I will do my best to be sensitive, not to overdo this. But among the things, and I'm going to, I just feel very strongly about this, that we have been so blessed. And I don't care how little you have, there are people who have less. Did you know that? There are some places, I'm about done, preacher. There are some places in St. Petersburg, and you want to go someplace. St. Petersburg, some of you are not familiar with it, it's a peninsula surrounded by water, lots of beaches, lots of really wealthy people there. But there's some people that aren't. And sometimes you're tempted, Tricia and I both are, tempted to take a different route, not the most direct route, because there's some areas that it just hurts your heart to drive through. It just hurts your heart to drive through. Can I tell you something? There's some places in Dunlap that hurts your heart to drive past. There really are. It just hurts your heart. Hello, if it doesn't hurt your heart, it should. It should. It should hurt your heart. Preacher, we're out of time, brother. You're on, and I went over, and I accept your apology. Don't ask them. We gave them their chance. They're done now. They're done.